Oftentimes, we put so much hope on what money will do for us.
Yeah.
And Arthur said something really interesting. It was, in essence, look, the studies show that when people move into a dream house, they're less happy 6 months later because they put so much hope that a dream house is going to do something for them.
Yeah.
And if that's what you're pinning your enjoyment on, you're going to be
disappointed.
Yeah, that's not what brings you joy.
What's up, guys? It's Jeff Burningham here on the Extraordinary Us podcast. So excited to be launching season 2. Finally, sitting in our home studio now. Really excited. Welcome. We're excited to have you. This is the purpose of the podcast. Despite our differences, we are all a lot more alike than we are different. No matter our circumstances, we are all just ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The purpose of this podcast is to share stories from people you may or may not have heard of to remind us of that fact. Also, I feel like many of us are kind of slowly bleeding out emotionally. And this last year has exhibited that, highlighted that, unfortunately. This podcast aims to elicit more compassion for people and less comparing to those around us, and to help us be more emotionally whole. And today, I've got a great guest in the podcast room with me, Steve Starks. I'm excited to have you here.
Good to be here.
I'm sure you know Steve, or many of you know him. He is the CEO of the Larry H. Miller Group, former president of the Utah Jazz, et cetera, et cetera. And he comes from a powerhouse family of Starks. Where did you guys grow up? Where are you guys from? Because there's a lot of brothers. You have a brother at the World Trade Center, right?
Yep.
You have a brother at GoEd. Obviously, you've been involved. How many Stark brothers are there?
There's 5 boys.
Okay.
We have 2 sisters as well.
Okay.
And so mom's from California, dad's Utah.
Uh-huh.
And I was born in California. And then my brother Ryan, who works at the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And then Aaron was born in Utah. And then Matt's our youngest. He was born in Utah as well. And so it's a great family. It was awesome growing up with boys, and we still love each other.
That's good.
All 5 of us, they're, very different in some ways, but really close.
That's awesome.
It's a blessing to grow up in a family like that.
Why are you so tight? And why have you been so successful? And speaking generally, I do think of the Stark family, like there's just a lot of cool Starks in Utah doing good things. What would you credit that to, or any thoughts about that?
I think we've always been close because our parents taught us to be close. And the one thing that my parents instilled in us is that we love each other. We can talk about any topic around the table. And my parents were super vulnerable with their life and background. And, my mom was adopted, only child. Her mom died at 14 years old. And my mom has experienced some things. My dad was a cop in LA.
Wow.
And so they never sheltered us from what the world was like. And they did a great job of just letting us know about their own experience and journeys. And so I think that fostered in us a togetherness and a closeness that continues to this day.
That's awesome. So what brought you guys to Utah?
I think my dad was just ready to get back.
Okay.
From here, went on a mission, went to California, worked, and then was just ready to get back. And
cool. So were you raised here? Did you grow up?
We moved here when I was 10,
Okay.
and then grew up in the Ogden Valley, which is like Huntsville, Eden, Liberty.
That is the good place. That's one of the best places in Utah.
Yeah, it is. It's a special place. Nobody should move there. Everybody should avoid it.
Yeah.
Though. If you're listening to this,
don't hear that.
Park City's amazing. Just go there.
Yeah, Eden, Huntsville. You did not hear that. Yeah. Did you grow up? Are you a skier or snowboarder?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not a skier or snowboarder.
So you didn't grow up skiing Powder Mountain?
No,
man.
but it's a great place to grow up. It's a rural environment. People are great, and so.
So your parents still in that beautiful valley?
They've moved down closer to us. We're in South Jordan.
Got it.
And they're close. Aaron's in South Jordan. And so we're kind of gathering in that part of the valley.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about how you got to the Larry H. Miller companies. I know a little bit of the story. Would love to hear more. I think it'd be interesting for our listeners to hear more. I'd love to hear a little bit of that. And what did you learn from Larry? What year did Larry pass away?
Larry would have passed away in 2009. Yeah.
So 12 years ago.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe. Tell us about how you got there, and maybe some thoughts on Larry. What a great pillar in the community, obviously, and did some amazing things that still having ripple effects. It's awesome.
I'm amazed at, there's this generation of people that don't know Larry.
I know. Isn't that weird?
Like they know Gail.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool because her
'cause
story
she's awesome.
now is almost become separate. I mean, they're always together, but in her own right, she's become one of the pillars of our community. I graduated from Weber State University and I went to DC, was going to go to law school, interned with Senator Hatch, and came home after that summer and said, I'm not going to go to law school. I'm not going to work in DC.
That's the other thing, though. The Starks are political. You guys are into politics.
Yeah, for some reason or another, we just all kind of gravitated towards, public service and been intrigued by that. My grandfather was the mayor of Clearfield, and so maybe it comes from that.
Yeah.
And so I ran a campaign for governor, for Nolan Karras, who and we all think very highly of. Mm-hmm. Ultimately lost to Jon Huntsman, and then I was licking my wounds and went to work for Rob Bishop in his second congressional campaign and ran that campaign, won. And then Huntsman, to his great credit, called and that team offered me a job to come and help manage the transition.
Yeah.
And so I managed, helped that process. And then when it was all done, Governor Huntsman at that time said, hey, we've had so many people involved and came up with so many recommendations. Let's keep a group together that's like a kitchen cabinet or an advisory board to me. And let's go tackle some things in state government in a way that can improve processes, efficiency, effectiveness. And so I became the managing director of that effort. And we put together a board. Larry was our chair.
Because Larry was the head of the transition, correct?
Yeah, he was the chairman.
Which, by the way, Steve was for now Governor Cox this last time.
Yeah.
So you kind of stepped into Larry's shoes in that regard. But so Larry led the transition, but then you stayed involved in that kitchen cabinet, or what was it called? Yeah,
it was called the Utah Policy Partnership.
Got it.
And it was like, let's go recruit private sector people to come and help state government. Let's look at a process. So let's look at consolidating all the IT in the state. And so my job was to go out and recruit people and say, hey, like, you're not going to make any money, but come help pro bono. Let's go tackle some things on behalf of the state. And it was a great effort. And our board was super solid. And after a couple of years of that, I was going to go to business school. And Larry said, hey, don't go to business school. Come to work for me instead.
That's totally Larry, right? Don't go to school.
Yeah.
So what year was that?
That was 2007.
And so what position did you step into? Because by the way, again, you're now the CEO, like you run, anyways, we can talk more about the companies. And so tell us about that ascent and what did you start out as? I think it's interesting,
Yeah, I really was set on business school because I wanted to go have that experience, but I had gotten to know Larry, and as much as anything was drawn to his personal character, personality, force of personality. And so we went to lunch one day and he said, in essence, we have some gray hair in our company and we need to develop some bench strength. Your job will be to work with me. You'll get to know the company. You'll get to know our industries that we operate in, our culture. And then over time, you'll naturally find areas where you'll make a big impact. And so it was a leap of faith because I'm going to an undefined role.
Yeah.
And by the way, we didn't even talk salary.
So why did you go?
Because it was Larry Miller.
I know.
And I thought, you know what? Like, I can always go to business school.
Yeah.
That's a good option. But to go work with somebody like that was really intriguing. And I had been married for like 4 months.
That's cool.
And so went home and was like, hey, I don't know what our salary is or what we're going to make, but it's a great opportunity. And honestly, I literally just sat with him for several months and went to his meetings, got to know our businesses and the rest of the Miller family. And after a couple of weeks, I said, hey, Larry, we've never talked about salary. And I told the story before. Yeah. And he's like, okay, let's talk about it. And so we settled on $80,000 a year.
Okay. Which is pretty good.
Yeah, it was like great. It was more about experience, and I was grateful for that. But he said to me, Steve, I promise you this: you may make a little bit more money in your life, but you'll never be happier. He's like, if you have enough money to take your kids and family to Disneyland, to fix the fridge if it goes out, and to have a little bit in savings, that's the highest level of enjoyment that you can get from money.
That's interesting.
And so what's interesting about it is 6 years later, we had Arthur Brooks come and speak at our leadership conference.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have gotten to know and admire Arthur Brooks, but they did a big economic study and gathered all this data. And they said, hey, the best salary range that brings the most happiness, $72,000 a year.
Yeah.
And he had all this
Is
data to
that
back it up.
current 72,000 a year?
This was 6-7 years ago.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. But that's definitely true. Like I've experienced that. I mean, anyways, yeah, keep going. That's what he said.
Yeah,
So
it was just interesting that after Larry passed away, an economist like validated what Larry's intuition was.
yeah.
And
He had lived it, right? He had come from
no
nothing.
question.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, we put so much hope on what money will do for us.
Yeah.
And Arthur said something really interesting. It was in essence, look, the studies show that when people move into a dream house, they're less happy 6 months later because they put so much hope that a dream house is going to do something for them.
Yeah.
And if that's what you're pinning your enjoyment on, you're going to be like,
disappointed.
Yeah, that's not what brings you joy.
Yeah, I have found that with everything in terms of money in life. I came from nothing and have built something, and that's how it always is. What I tell my kids is don't ever spend money on things. Experiences are what matter. Experiences are cool. Relationships and experiences. Those create memories that you don't ever forget. And those are the real valuable things in life, right?
Yeah.
It's not even a dream house, et cetera. Obviously, you need a roof over your heads. And that's why this middle income, I would bet that 72,000 now is, I don't know what, 100,000 or whatever. But having that amount of cash so that you have a roof over your head, but there's not this heavy burden that kind of comes with that. And you witnessed that firsthand. Have you seen that? What have you learned about that with the Miller family and now working so closely with Ryan and his family, the Smith family?
Yeah. Like we were just talking about before this, I think at a certain point, what you realize is it's about talents. And how do we take 3 talents and make 5? And how do we take 5 and make 8? And if that's our motive to do well with the opportunities given to us to serve and bless others, it's a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah.
If it's just about accumulation, then we become selfish by nature, I think, and we're not abundant in our mentality. And so,
how have we gotten fooled in our society? Like, why are we not thinking about this? I guess this is an age-old problem, but like, how can we think more like this generally? It's not easy, right?
It's not easy. I think there's some comparison that drives it.
Yeah.
I think we are living in a very interesting economy right now. It's been called the K economy.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy to assume that everybody is doing well. I grew up with nothing too.
Yeah.
I went to Weber State after my mission.
I love that.
And I got a Pell Grant. My family qualified for a Pell Grant. And yet there was something about that experience of having to strive every day to get a scholarship, to be able to work while going to college that has developed me into who I am. And I don't think we should discount the experience and the journey that we go through, and that there's something powerful about that money will never provide. And now we're in situations, and I don't know what your family situation's like or how you think about this, but my kids are never going to have to go through those experiences.
Yeah.
They're going to have different experiences.
Yeah. Doesn't that kind of make you sad?
Yeah,
it does.
But yet as parents, we're tempted to not want them to go through those things too.
Yeah. But that's what created us.
Yeah.
Right? That's the character that was built inside of us.
No question.
Same within Ryan, right? Ryan's story or Larry's story. It's that character that was built as they struggled, as they learned, that was so valuable in the end. What did you learn? What did you learn from Larry Miller? What are the couple of key takeaways? What was he really like? You were close to him. Most people were not,
Yeah. Larry was unguarded. He would do his weekly radio show, and he would open his mouth and there were no secrets.
I'm sorry. He had a weekly radio show? I didn't know.
Yeah, he had a weekly radio show. And
like
he
on
just,
KSL? Or?
It was on one of the sports radio stations.
Oh, okay.
And so what you saw was what you got with Larry.
Yeah.
He was authentic. He was the guy wearing khakis and white shoes. I really admired that because he opened up to you. You felt this sense of emotional connection. And I think that as a leader, that's really hard to do.
Yeah. Because
a lot of people wanted Larry's time and attention, and he was open.
Yeah.
And he was authentic and real. And sometimes that was emotional. And yet you loved him. And before I got there, the stories of Larry is that he could be hard on people.
Yeah.
But people never left because they knew that Larry loved them.
Yeah.
And so they tolerated some of that because he treated them really well and fairly. And they loved him as much as they felt he loved them, which was an enormous amount. The other thing with Larry is that he was incredibly intelligent. in an unorthodox way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he told me that if he knew how to do a business plan, he would have never bought the Jazz because it would have said run.
Yeah.
But he knew numbers and he knew cash flow, and he managed the business early on in that way with an incredible amount of risk. But in his mind, it was acceptable risk because he knew how the numbers were going to work and that the cash flow would be there.
Yeah.
I could never replicate his mastery over numbers. I think he had a photographic memory. He would memorize Toyota part numbers, literally.
Really?
Like he became the first parts manager in Toyota to sell $1 million of parts.
Really?
Because he memorized the part numbers and he could go get it off the shelf quicker. And
That's
so there's a lot that you couldn't follow. But I would just say this in summary. Larry always wanted to do what was right.
Yeah.
And he, like, the values piece wasn't just talk. It wasn't just a sign on the wall when you walk in the corporate headquarters. He told me, Steve, I want to walk past somebody in 10 years and look them in the eye and say, hey, we did a deal 10 years ago. We both won and we both feel good about that.
Yeah.
It's like, I never want to take advantage of somebody and we want to do it right.
That's cool. Yeah. I think it's really hard. I have felt this at times. I mean, you have to have a certain amount of energy to build. You know, Ryan Smith has a certain amount of energy. Larry certainly did. We all have. But it's this balance between understanding that relationships are what matters. Mm-hmm. How did you see Larry evolve in that? Or how you know, you've worked now with Larry and with Ryan and others. What have you learned from that? What's the balance? How do you balance that? You know, how do you be hard charging and ready to get things done, but also worry about the individual just as much and the person? That's hard at times.
It is hard. I don't think Larry did it very well, honestly.
Yeah.
I think he would be the first. He has said that.
But he evolved, right, as he got
did.
older. But keep going.
Yeah,
because that's kind of the reputation I think he has, is that he did burn some bridges. He wasn't meaning to, I'm sure, but
yeah, it just early on he pushed so hard
yeah,
that he didn't have balance in his life. He didn't prioritize things that I think he regretted later in life, and the rest of the Miller family, as a result, now I think has learned. They observe that, and so you have Gail, who is remarkably hardworking.
Yeah.
Engaged. And yet with Gail, she always reminds you, make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Make sure you're taking care of your families. Don't get burned out. And so she has developed that balance. And I think our generation, it's more accepted than it was. There's like this old school mentality where you just had to grind.
Yeah.
And now I think that you and I and our generation would say that you can work really hard, but it shouldn't come
still
at the
talk about your
expense
kids.
of,
And still be with your kids and still say,
you know,
that was even hard for me though, early in my career. Was it hard for you?
Yeah, I think it definitely is. I had a colleague one time come in and said, you need to go on vacation.
Yeah.
Like leave, literally. You need to go plan something and get away for a week. I can tell that you need it and your family needs it. And so it's healthy.
Yeah, that's great. So tell us about I guess before we get into the Jazz, let's just talk about the Larry H. Miller companies now. You're the CEO. What does that mean? What do those companies look like? What's exciting, whatever.
Yeah. So over the years, the Miller organization's really become a diverse portfolio management company. We own and operate businesses like automotive, 60 plus automotive dealerships in 7 states, one of the biggest automotive retailers in the country. We have a large automotive finance company, Prestige Financial, which is a great organization. We have the Jazz, obviously Megaplex, the Bees, the Vivint Arena, and then we've had a growing real estate portfolio of businesses. 5 years ago, Gail put in place a board of directors, and the board said, look, let's diversify even further. And knowing what the family's goals were, we started on that track to diversify. And at the end of last year, we acquired a healthcare company, Advanced Healthcare. They run skilled nursing facilities, post-acute facilities, help people transition after a surgery back into everyday life.
Yeah.
They
SNFs or whatever,
SNFs,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
skilled
the
nursing
terminology.
facilities. Yes,
and
I've just heard of it because I'm investing things. But
yeah, they have over 20 facilities. Great business, a really solid management team, and so that was a great opportunity for us to get into a business that matched our values, our geographical footprint, and then diversify the portfolio. And then last year, obviously, the sale of 80% of the Jazz in the Arena has created a catalyst for us to be able to grow and invest. And And just last week, it was announced that we acquired the Daybreak development in South Jordan, which is
awesome.
Yeah, it's the 5th largest master plan community in the country, and it still has thousands and thousands of homes to be built on it, and 300 acres of commercial and some surrounding area that we want to do right. That's about building communities. And I think one of our investment philosophies has become, let's build communities.
Yeah.
We did it through the Jazz. We literally Miller family built up the community by keeping that asset in this state and then building an incredible fan base and arena. And we want to be in and around good things. We look long-term, and so you'll see us continue to invest, grow, and hopefully impact the community in positive ways.
That's exciting. I mean, Daybreak's an exciting development, obviously already what's there and what is to come. And like you said, that's a big part of your legacy, right? Like that's a critical neighborhood or, development for Utah, but certainly on the west side of Salt Lake City, the capital and biggest city in Utah. I mean, it's absolutely enormous.
Well, that southwest part of the county is enormous because the growth out there is so
there's land,
significant.
Right? And so it just people keep pushing it. Like that's where a lot of the growth is going.
And there's infrastructure.
Yeah.
There's a tracks line that ends right in what's called downtown Daybreak, which will be developed. There's the Mountain View corridor. There's Bangor Highway, which they're improving and doing these flyovers. You'll be to the airport in 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a strategic location for economic development where you can raise a family. And ultimately, we want to bring jobs there. We want to have campus of office buildings, and as we've met with county mayor and others, Mayor Ramsey in South Jordan, they've all said like we need to take some infrastructure or some pressure off our infrastructure. There's so much talent that lives in and around that area. Let's just make sure that we're building corporate centers, so that they don't have to drive to Lehigh. Yeah,
that's a big issue. I mean, I know when I was running for governor, I spent a lot of time out there. That is a huge, and with Mayor Ramsey, that is a huge issue, right? That's where the growth is. That's where people are going. But how do you maintain a great quality of life? Yeah. You got to have infrastructure. You got to have ways for people to get to places, job centers, good roads, et cetera. That's a big deal. So Daybreak's a huge deal. The Jazz, keep going.
Well, and I think that 2020 taught us that we can be more flexible in how we work and where we work.
That's for sure.
And so we plan to do that there.
That's awesome. Hey guys, it's Jeff. Thank you so much for listening to the Extraordinary Us podcast. There's a lot of momentum behind the podcast right now, and we are so excited. I've got a special guest with me for a second here, my wife, Sally.
Hello, good to be here.
Why are you here, Sal?
We're starting a new podcast together, which I am super excited about. It is called Under Our Bed.
And we are literally people under our bed recording.
We are sitting right under our bed.
And if you want to hear more about why we called it Under Our Bed, tune in to our first episode, wherever you get your podcasts, because we're going to explain what it means. We hope to have candid and meaningful conversations together about issues that are relevant to you today.
Absolutely.
Good night, Sal.
Good night.
The Jazz have been making the news a little bit this year. Yeah. Let's just say a little. This has been a huge year for the Jazz. Like, number one, they're great.
Yeah.
The team's awesome. They have the best record in the NBA. They're on fire. I love Jordan Clarkson. He's such a gunner. For those of you who have played basketball with me and are growing up or still do, I just love that gunner mentality. I'm a shooter, and I love the team. Obviously, the deal, you were right. I mean, you were. How did that come together? I mean, in as much as you can tell us, how did that come together? What was considered? You spoke about diversification within the Larry H. Miller companies. Yeah. You have these cash flowing businesses like car dealerships and everything automotive. But I guess the family, maybe unbeknownst to people, maybe hadn't had a big liquidity event, so to speak, or an exit or selling a business until the Jazz. Is that correct? So, tell us about how that came together. Tell us as much as you can. I mean, people are curious. How did that come together? And what was kind of the thinking from the Miller side? Whatever you can share would be awesome.
Yeah, glad to talk about that. You're right. Larry used to say, we buy these businesses to run them, not to sell them. And when Greg Miller became the CEO, he's like, I don't know that still makes sense for us. There's some businesses we may want to sell or get out of.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case with the Jazz. It was never something that they were looking to sell or get out of. Obviously, that's been a labor of love to build that franchise. It's one of the most winning franchise over the last 30 years. And Adam Silver literally almost cried when he found out the Millers were selling.
Really?
Because they've been model NBA owners and stewardship and doing it the right way. And so it was unexpected. It wasn't like a 5-year strategic plan to sell the team. I think that in 2020 with COVID, everybody started to look differently at what was the future and how did the Miller family want to define legacy. And, over the years, Ryan had become a great partner. We respected him. We loved the Fight for the Fight jersey patch.
Yeah.
It kind of showed who he was. And he had expressed interest multiple times that he wanted to buy the Jazz. And I would always say, and Gail would always say, hey, it's not for sale.
Yeah.
Ryan
that wasn't a secret around town, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so Ryan and I had lunch one day, right here, actually, close by at Riverside Country Club. And he had said, I almost bought an NBA team and decided not to. And he reiterated his interest. And I left that lunch and I thought, you know what, there's something different about that conversation for some reason. And so it planted a seed in my mind that, I wonder if this will ever happen. I wonder if it's the right time for us. And then
that's interesting.
Independent of that conversation, a couple members of the Miller family brought it up to me and less about Ryan and just more about, hey, is it the right time for us to look to sell the Jazz?
Mm-hmm.
And are there other things that we would want to do now? And, we've accomplished so much with that. Maybe it's somebody else's turn to be a steward.
Yeah.
And so as we started having those conversations, those two paths really merged. Ryan's interest, the Miller family's, willingness to explore what they wanted to do into the future, and they merged. And Ryan and I were, I've received authority from our board of directors to go negotiate, the term, the sell of the Jazz and the terms, and it was great.
How did Ryan react when you told him that maybe this could happen?
Yeah, well, I think he was, I think the exact phrase I said is, Ryan, I'm authorized to have this conversation with you.
Yeah.
We're not going to open this up.
Oh, cool. So it was just with Ryan.
Yeah, like if we can get this done with you, then we're not going to have to go through a process.
Yeah.
And I think that's, a lot of people would tell you hire an investment bank, run a deep process. And for the Millers, it was more about, let's be fair, but let's make sure that we're selling to the right person.
Yeah.
Because the success of the team long-term would define the success of the transaction. And so Ryan didn't blink, and he was great. And what we said through the process, and I give him enormous credit, is this is about, the Millers. It's about Ryan Smith, but it's about the community first and foremost. And so all the way through the transaction, all the way through the process, and ever since, it's been about what's good for Utah and what's good for the franchise long term. And Jeff, it's been really cool to see. And I remember one conversation, it's like, you're buying a really good team.
Yeah.
And in one of the conversations with the Millers, I'm like, look, let me just paint a picture for you. Imagine Adam Silver, the NBA commissioners, handing the trophy at center court.
Oh no, don't paint that. I mean, paint that picture, but that's painful, right?
Yeah, it's and imagine that's being handed to Ryan Smith. Are you okay with that? Like emotionally before this decision is made. And you know what they said?
What did they say?
They said, yes, because it's about the community. It's about the state. And we will share in that pride. Like we'll feel good. It's not about us. And so Ryan, we have a really good team, and this team could be special. And
I think so. I think it is, and that's so exciting.
But he has stepped up every step of the way.
He's awesome.
Like he has done an incredible job, and really proud of him as a friend, really proud of him as a fan, and and I'm here to help him. He knows that. And
what have you learned about Ryan through the process and/or the Smith family and his vision? Like, what makes you excited for the future for the Jazz and for the franchise under the Smith?
I just think that he brings an energy about it and a passion that you feel. It's palpable.
Yeah.
He's engaged, but Ryan's a really good listener. I can't tell you how many times he's called me and just asked, like, Steve, what are your thoughts? How would you handle this?
He's a learner. He asks good questions. Yeah,
he does. And there's been some times where I will offer my perspective on what things were done in the past and how we would approach it. I'd give my opinion on a specific situation and offer to help. And he's collaborative. He's super inclusive in the way that he leads and operates. I've been impressed that I think a lot of NBA owners would want to come in and put their fingerprints on everything right away. And Ryan's said, like, look, first of all, we have the best team in the NBA record-wise right now.
Yeah.
And so let's not mess anything up.
Yeah.
And then he's going to put his own touch on it over time, and personalization, which I think you're starting to feel, which is great. And I think our fans are responding to it well. And so and let me just summarize. I think he's a great listener. I think he's collaborative. He's inclusive. I think that what he did with Dwayne Wade was remarkable.
Yeah, D Wade, baby. Yeah, that's cool.
I think it just showed a willingness to be courageous.
Yeah.
Dwayne Wade is one of the most respected NBA players of the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of owners would say they would be threatened by that because, hey, is he going to have a bigger voice than me? Or Ryan wasn't about that. He's like, look, let's build the best team, the best ownership group, and it's going to pay dividends for all of us. And so I love that move.
Yeah, that's
and
exciting.
I think that's a glimpse into his, creativity and courage.
Yeah, how did that come together? I know a little bit, but don't want to say too much. And, Dwayne is close to Clark Miyasaki, who has ties to Utah. Clark is one of the founders, works at Stance, and had a partnership on socks with the NBA, and has been close to all those guys a little bit, and knows, is kind of in the crew here, knows Ryan and all the entrepreneurship kind of community. When did you get a glimpse of that happening, and what's the vision that you might be able to share that we have for it?
I just, Ryan brought it up to me a couple months ago and said, what do you think? And I thought it's really intriguing. And Dwayne is universally respected. We just talked about structure, strategy, and all of that roles. And over the last couple of months, I think that Ryan got really close to Dwayne and needed to get a feel for who he was. And I don't want to say too much, but the one thing I can say is that Ryan said to him, hey, you have to be all in on Utah.
Yeah.
We're partners. We're doing this together. We're building this. And Dwayne was. And so it was announced last Friday, and I think it took the world by surprise.
Yeah.
Not the first time in the last 12 months that news about the Jazz
has surprised everybody. The Jazz are on fire.
But it's been fun.
Yeah, it was so funny. There was a post on Facebook from our state auditor, John Dougal, who is a good friend of both of ours, and we know well in politics. He's the state auditor, and he posted something like, I've never heard of Dwayne Wade. And I responded on Facebook. I said, never has it been more clear to me that I was so far outside of my lane running for governor last year than this post. Though I'm an entrepreneur, I'm not a politician, no post has made it more clear to me how far outside my lane was, that you had all these, I think Amy Winder chimed in and, yeah, who's Dwayne Wade? I'm like, oh my gosh, You don't know who Dwayne Wade is. It was just so, I'm saying that in good fun, and it's just funny.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. That's huge for the Jazz. It's huge for Ryan. I'm super happy and excited about that. Let me ask one more question before we move on. How much, because this kind of came together in the last year, how much did COVID and Black Lives Matter, all of the civil unrest and everything that's happened in the last year, how much did that play into this time? I know it played some. The world's changed, things have changed. This has been a unique year in every way for everyone, including the Jazz, including and so how much did that play into it? I'm just curious, or give us some thoughts or feelings, because when the news came out that, right away that Ryan was buying, I wasn't shocked, maybe as shocked as most people. I was a little surprised, but to me, actually, it made sense with the timing because of some of the things we've spoken about. Give us an inside look on how the last year kind of played into that.
I think it only played into it in that COVID, the pandemic, probably within all of us allowed us to see some things from a different perspective.
Interesting. So reflection.
Yeah. I think it created reflection. That would be the biggest impact. Fortunately, from an economic standpoint, the organization was very healthy in 2020, meaning the Larry H. Miller Group of companies. Most of our businesses thrived in this weird economy that we had. And the Jazz were shut down for the summer and got back going in Orlando, but movie theaters were shut down, but they represent a fairly small part of the total. And so the nice thing was the decision to sell wasn't because of financial pressure.
Nope, I know that.
It was a pure decision where it was like, look, we're very blessed and fortunate that businesses are thriving. Is this the right decision for us? As it relates to Black Lives Matter, that had zero impact on the Miller family's desire to sell.
Yeah.
I think if anything, what we showed last year was support of the players and what they were going through, and support of the conversation that took place nationally around let's be better to each other, and let's look at some things objectively, fairly, and say we can get better. And in those moments, for me personally and for the Miller family, I think reaching out and talking to our our Black colleagues, our friends, our associates, and having real conversations made us better. And I think that was the experience that we all felt. And it's not like the Millers to ever run from a controversial issue. They want to do what's right. And I think that was demonstrated throughout the course of the summer up until the sale. And it continues to be.
Yeah.
One of the things that Ryan has done so well is the scholarship program for every win.
Yep.
I don't know if I can't recall if this idea came from that, but a lot of people don't know that Gail Miller's been doing that for 18 years.
Okay.
She hasn't tied it to wins, but
Yeah.
there's about 40 scholarships that she's paid for a year that go to minority and underserved students to go to the University of Utah. And it's called the Larry H. Miller Enrichment Scholarship. Like I said, it's in its 17th or 18th year. And that continues because I think that Gail in particular has led within our community this conversation around let's help lift each other up, regardless of race, ethnicity, background, whatever it might be.
That's awesome. Let me, we could talk forever. I wish we had more time, and there's so many things I'd like to ask. Let me ask three kind of maybe more rapid fire questions, just because I know we've got to run, but a word about Gail and Greg. And, I know Gail a little bit, know Greg fairly well. I've skied with him a little bit and talked to him a little bit about the governor run. He considered running as well. We talked about Larry. I mean, Gail's just a treasure, right? Like a state of Utah national treasure, and Greg's awesome. A little bit about Gail and Greg.
Yeah, Gail is remarkably classy, dignified. She's as good as you think she is. She cares about the community. She cares about the legacy of this organization and doing it right. She is not driven by the bottom line. And she wants to make Utah a better place in her own way. And so whether that's donating to children's hospitals or homelessness, she's incredible. And her kids are incredible. Yeah. You mentioned Greg. Steve is the vice chair of the board. Her son, Brian.
Don't know the other kids as well.
Great family. And they're all equally committed to doing it the right way.
That's awesome.
And
how many children are there?
There's Greg. They had a son pass away named Roger about 6-7 years ago. There's Steve. There's Brian, there's Karen, who's the daughter, and then Zane, Larry and Gail raised Zane.
Awesome. Cool.
Who's a grandson.
That's awesome.
So, and I would just say this, without getting into numbers, Gail took a big percentage of the proceeds from the sale of the Jazz and put it in her foundation. And that because she wants that foundation to live in perpetuity and giving to the community. She'll continue to be a force, right? Like just in the community. It's awesome. Tell us about, you're pretty close with Spencer Cox, the governor, much to my chagrin. I was like, Steve, come out. You're like, come help me. I'm running for governor. But just talk to me a little bit about are you excited? I know you're excited. You ran the overall transition. I helped with the economic transition, ran the GoEd committee. We worked together on that. Talk to me maybe about the transition of Huntsman versus Cox. You had experience in both, and why you're excited about the Governor Cox,
Well, first of all, I think it's incredible that you ran for governor, because we complain all the time about we don't get the right people to run, and you're the right person. The fact that you put yourself out there as a business leader, entrepreneur, community builder, I think is incredible. And we need more willing people to take the risk and get involved and bring their perspectives. Because if it's the same kind of political hobbyist, that doesn't lead to good governance or policy. And so
I appreciate that.
I really admire you doing that, and your family, because it's not easy.
It's not. That is one of the small reasons, by the way, I ran, is just to open the gate a little wider for maybe Silicon Slopes entrepreneurs or whatever, to say, maybe I could get involved in politics. But that's nice of you to say. I appreciate that. Great. It was a very good learning and painful experience, as well. It was good.
Well, Spencer and I have been friends for several years. Before he was going to run for governor. And I have admired his personal attributes, his commitment. Him and Abby, I think, are incredible people, first and foremost. And then when he got serious about running, I was very supportive of that, because for those other reasons. He's a really gifted communicator. I think that we would all recognize that he's very human.
Yeah.
I think that we've seen that he has helped our state already by being able to address some policy issues in human terms, and to see it less as a political issue, more of
how do we treat each other as human beings, as fellow Utahns.
Yeah.
And so I've been, pleased with that. It's not unexpected, proud of him. The transition was a great process because you don't have these too often in government.
Yeah.
And I think that it would be tempting to think about, okay, the Herbert Cox administration, let's just keep everything going. But the governor-elect and lieutenant governor-elect said, let's just look at everything with fresh eyes, as though a new administration was coming in, which it was, but let's look at everything. And so we assembled a great team. You led the economic development task force. We had that replicated about 25 times. Lynn Ward was the co-chair. She's a veteran of government, very impressive woman and leader. And so the end result of that, I think, was a good assessment of the talent and then the recruiting of additional talent to come and work in state government, and then some recommendations on structure, some consolidation that would make sense strategically to create efficiencies, and also just some governance principles that I think will help long term.
Yeah, I'm super bullish on what's going on there. I think it is exciting, and it is good to get a fresh perspective. You don't have these changeovers very often, and I've appreciated the way that even though Spencer was the lieutenant governor, gosh, take this time for change to make progress. Yeah. The Jazz were great. I think Ryan can take it to the next level. Gary, the Governor Herbert was great. Hopefully Governor Cox can make it to the best level. And I think the Millers and the Herberts, they hope that as well.
No question.
You kind of build upon each other, right? That's the Utah way. And I've been impressed by that. Last question, then I'll let you go. What are you excited about in the future? What's next for Steve Starks? I've loved getting to know you, and I'm so impressed with what you've been able to accomplish. It's unbelievable at your age, and you're certainly a leader here in the state and beyond. But what's next? What are you excited about? Give us a feel and a flavor for.
I'm really excited about where our organization's going.
Yeah.
I think the Daybreak acquisition was remarkably strategic and surprising to the market, because that's not traditionally what we've been in. But I think that sets an interesting stage for us moving future and helping build this state out from a real estate standpoint. I'm excited about the opportunity to go partner with good people to make good investments that are going to have an impact long term, to acquire companies that make sense. And I've never been more excited, and I think that others in our organization would tell you this, about our future, because of the opportunities we now have. And we want to get it right. We want to do it in a strategic way, but in a way that's sustainable, that has a long-term impact. We want to be very successful so we can give more money to Gail to give to the foundation, which will enrich the community for a long time to come. Personally, my oldest daughter is about to become a teenager. So
welcome.
What's next for us is talking about whether or not she gets a cell phone.
Exactly.
So love
Gab Wireless. Have you heard of Gab?
Yeah, Gab Wireless, plug for a Utah company.
Yeah,
the founder of that's a former neighbor of mine, by the way. Great guy.
They just raised a round yesterday.
I saw that. Taysom Hill invested, right?
Yeah.
Did you invest in it?
Yeah, it was super fun. Yeah. Anyways, yeah.
I think it's great. So
that's cool.
Just continue to try to do good things. And
yeah, well, Steve, like I said, what I've appreciated about you, and this is kind of the purpose of the podcast. You're an ordinary guy in this. You're a dad. You went to Weber State. You're from Huntsville, Utah, but you're doing extraordinary things.
No, thank you.
I think the world of you. I think you're a great role model for up and coming business people and civic leaders in the state. Certainly there's a bright future for you. Are you interested in politics? Like, do you think you'll ever, do you like being the supportive role, or do you think you'd ever step out and say, here I am, let's go?
Yeah, I'm really comfortable
I dare you,
being
by the
the
way,
supportive
to do that.
role.
It's super fun, believe me.
I enjoy helping.
Yeah.
I enjoy being supportive. I don't know that I would want to go through what it takes now.
Yeah.
I'm really worried about the state of our politics.
So am I. Yeah, it's a whole different conversation, but
it's
scary.
I think that we are becoming further and further polarized around issues, and that we need to come together, and that we need to stop seeing each other as enemies. And I turned on, I'll just say this. I turned on Fox News last night, and I don't do that too often.
Yeah.
I read Twitter. I like to read more than watch the news now. But what I saw in about a 5-minute segment was disheartening.
Yeah.
I mean, they were going after former President Bush, and they were mocking him. They were making fun of his art. And what I find is that it's mean-spirited. It's become like like an entertainment spectacle.
Yeah. Almost like blood sport, you know?
Yeah. And if that's what people are watching, and that if they're following those cues about the way that we should see the world and each other, then we're going to be in trouble. We have to see each other for who we are.
Yeah.
And that's people, brothers and sisters. You know, we should respect the fatherhood of God. And that means inherently that there's a brotherhood and a sisterhood of man. And that infinitely is more important than these other things. And policy matters, and I get it, and good governance and the Constitution, like those are things I feel strongly about. I love. They've made the greatest country in the history of the world. But that greatest country can fall apart if we start seeing each other as enemies, and we have to come together.
Totally agree. I mean, we can have vigorous debate. We can disagree about things. We're not enemies, though. As soon as you become evil to me because you don't disagree with me or vice versa, we're in a bad state. Yeah. And I feel like that's where we're headed.
And if our politicians are just, if they're scoring points by ripping each other apart, or whoever can give the sharpest dagger to somebody, like that's, come on. We need to elevate the rhetoric. We need to elevate the intelligence with which we're approaching these things. And hopefully we can.
Well, Steve, I appreciate your friendship. Thanks for coming down. I can't wait to see what you do in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. The rise of Steve Starks is such an incredible and amazing story. I mean, Larry Miller kind of handpicked him, 15 years, a little bit out of obscurity. I mean, obviously he has immense talents and potential, but Larry saw something in him, brought him into the organization, not even sure, I think, exactly what he was going to do. It was more like, hey, you're a talented person. Let's find a place for you to help here. And now he is the CEO of the Larry H. Miller Group. He had been the president of the Utah Jazz for the last 5 years or so before Ryan Smith brought the franchise. But that rise is incredible to me. Number one, 3 things stuck out. That's the first. Number 2, it's interesting to talk about Black Lives Matter a little bit, especially this week. Here's my challenge, and I see the Millers doing this. I see Ryan Smith doing this. I see many people across the state and in our country doing this, but this is what I've tried to do is I've thought of this problem and this challenge and what can I do about this issue? Pick something that you personally can do to make a difference. One of the things I've done is tried to invest some more dollars in Black founders here in the state of Utah. I've never said that publicly, but that's a way that I can personally help. And so a year or so, a little more or a little less than a year ago, I said, hey, this is a way that I can help. I've gone on a couple boards to try to help these Black founders be successful in entrepreneurship. What can you do in your personal circumstance and in your personal life to be inclusive, to share the love and to be a good example? The last thing is, I think this Daybreak acquisition, which again was just announced, is an exciting precursor for a lot of what's to come for the Larry H. Miller family, for the Miller family, I should say, the Larry H. Miller companies, for Steve Starks. They are looking for massive projects within the state of Utah where they can leave their mark and leave their legacy. I have no doubt that they'll do that. Steve Starks is the leader of that organization. I appreciate his friendship. I can't wait to see what he does in the future. Keep an eye out there. And thank goodness for great families all across our state, our country, and our world that are normal, that have challenges, that have ups and downs, but are doing their best. And like he said, the parable of the talents, they're trying to turn their 3 or 5 talents into 6 or 10. Let us all do that in our sphere of influence and where we can.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Extraordinary Us podcast with Jeff Burningham. Please help us grow by leaving a rating and review and subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Also, tell your friends and share on social media. See you again next week.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Jeff.
And Sal.
I'm here with my wife. Why? Because we're starting a podcast together.
Yes, we are.
And it's called
Under Our Bed.
Why is it called that, Sally?
Because we are sitting under our bed right now.
We are.
In this podcast
Yes.
studio.
And we're going to be talking about things that are interesting, vulnerable, relevant.
Funny.
So check it out. Funny if you're on. So check it out wherever you get your podcast, wherever you listen to The Extraordinary Us. Look for Under Our Bed with Jeff and Sal.
Check it out.
Good night.
Good night.